a bit of an intro here first anyway. So firstly, thanks everybody for joining. I'm just going to make sure I'm not on mute. Yes, that's correct. Thank you for joining this session focused on kind of supporting how to streamline some submission content preparation processes using DocShifter where the content resides in OpenText Documentum. We have run similar sessions to this on where Viva, Vault with repositories or SharePoint with repositories as well, basically with a similar content, but just obviously focused on those sources instead. So this one obviously be focused on Documentum. If you do have other repository types that you are considering as well, we do have those sessions available that are recorded that we can send you as a link also. With that, I'll just get started. Just explain, just to give a quick intro in terms of some of the issues you may have with content preparation in general, especially related to submission content. Look at some specific use cases. Start off with a virtual document rendering or report generation with automated, a fully automated process as well. We'll look at how you can take Word content and prepare it automatically for even prior to rendering it, converting it to PDF, how you can fix some common issues in Word content or identify issues, how you can then also create multiple, not just one, but potentially multiple global renditions as well using the rendering platform. And then also once you have PDFs, whether you've created them yourselves, whether you've been supplied them by CRO partners or other content providers, how you can actually analyze, ensure everything is ready to be included in the submission, is submission ready, and how you can potentially fix automatically some of those issues as well. And we'll look at some other ad hoc use cases also at the end. With that, just by way of intro, obviously in terms of content preparation, especially where it relates to submission content, a number of challenges that you typically will face. Obviously, the process can be quite slow, long-winded. It's resource intensive and involves more people than it perhaps should, with a lot of manual steps in the process, a lot of manual kind of checking and fixing issues with the content in one shape or another. Obviously, anything that's manual introduces elements of risk in the process and in the results. And often because they're using multiple tools to perform different aspects of the content preparation, the whole process becomes quite complex and introduces quite a significant burden sometimes on training as well. So a number of just, obviously, there's other challenges you may face, but this is just some of them. In terms of what I'm going to focus on is how DocShifter, the rendering platform that we have, the transformation platform, is able to help you with automate some of those processes that may be quite manual today, how you can automate them. And really, DocShifter is a platform that's used by organizations of different size, from very small to extremely large organizations, taking content from one repository, from one location, analyzing that content and potentially transforming it in some way, for example, rendering it to PDF or transforming it in other ways, enriching the content for ease of navigation or ease of use, or just enriching it in terms of cover pages, etc., and then storing the output somewhere, either back in the repository the source content came from, or somewhere else as well. What we're going to focus on here is specifically where Documentum is that input and output location, if you like. So really what we're trying to sort of highlight is that rendering platforms are not just for converting from one format to another. Often they're seen as just being a piece of software that converts from Word or Excel to PDF. And that's basically it. But it can do far more than that as well. And if you combine the functionality in different ways, you can ultimately enhance many different use cases, which we'll talk about some of them here. One thing also is that you can take content from different repositories. This is a rendering platform that isn't tied to any specific repository. It can sit outside and connect to one or multiple repository types. You can have it connecting to Documentum or Viva or SharePoint or Box or Kara, for example, or DocuBridge. You can connect to all of them from one single server because it sits outside. And it can pull content of many different types. So not just your Office formats, image-based formats, complex diagrams like CAD, audio, video conversions, etc. as well. But if you take that content, and rather jaggedy transition there, obviously other capabilities can be introduced as part of these automated workflows in the background. So as it pulls the content, it can also look at it, if it's a Word document, for example, it can look and validate the content to ensure it meets certain internal and external guidelines in terms of the way that content is presented, etc. as well. You can make sure that any image-based content is text searchable. So you are able to OCR the content automatically as part of that process. You can merge multiple documents together or split documents that are too large up. So that can be useful for report generation or to ensure that your file sizes don't exceed any industry guidelines and limitations. You're also able to add headers and footers where you could add, your company information or information about the document into the header and footer, or apply pagination if it hasn't been applied correctly in the original source. So that can all be applied at a rendering stage. Watermarks can be added to ensure that it's clear of the purpose of that document, whether it's still in draft or it's a confidential document. You can apply the watermarks automatically, depending on the lifecycle state, for example. Add bookmarks, obviously ensure that it's fully bookmarked for ease of navigation by the reviewers or whoever's consuming the content. And it goes beyond just bookmarking as you would if you convert using Office and save it as PDF. You may have complex styles that you have in your templates that don't by default get bookmarked. So all of that can be automated more. And even when you got OCR'd content, you may want to bookmark that as well and not have to do it all manually. So look at things like that. Add cover pages either to the beginning of a document or to a collection of documents. And we'll look at some of those things afterwards, as well as creating tables of contents where it's appropriate, making sure no security is applied, or applying security if you're going to share that content with other external parties where you may want to password protect or secure the content in some way as well. But more often than not, you're actually removing security to make sure that it's ready to be submitted to a health authority. You can also then do PDF validation as well automatically. So rather than having a checklist on your PDF that you're manually going through to check various elements of the PDF, that can be automated in these workflows as well. And if you combine those capabilities in different ways, it can be used for many different use cases, the platform. So whether it's that creating compliant output, and to create a compliant output, you may have to convert it to PDF, add a table of content, and add, and split it because it's too large. So you could combine a few different pieces of capability to create the compliant output. Or for reports, you may combine different functions, etc. So really what we're going to do is create workflows that sit in the background, that are automated, that basically monitor different repositories, whether that's job queues in Documentum or folders in SharePoint or folders or network drives. We're going to focus here very much on Documentum. So most of the time, we're going to be monitoring specific job queues for jobs that have been submitted to be processed in some way, shape, or form. So these, as I say, a user doesn't ever see these. These are just configurations in the background to say, how should we treat the content that's being submitted to those queues? So then it's just a simple drag or drop that configured and run in the background. So looking at the first use case about taking virtual documents or manipulating them or taking them and actually rendering them, if you like, as a collection of content, basically treating them like a report, but taking the virtual document as the starting point and then merging it together and doing all of the aspects that you need to, for report generation. And when we talk about reports, I just want to focus first on whether or not those of you on the call actually already use virtual documents. So you may use Documentum. Not everybody uses virtual documents. Just curious how many of you online actually do use virtual documents right now. Thank you. Quite a few answers coming in. The majority of people are. There's a few who aren't, but the majority of you are still using virtual documents. So thank you very much for that. That is useful. Thank you. With that, maybe just explain briefly what I mean by a report. So as I say, can use it for report generation. Really, it's one or more files, a collection of files that can be merged together into one or multiple enriched PDF files. And by enriching them, it may be that we take those files, we're merging them together, converting them to PDF, merging them together. We may add things like cover pages at the beginning of the thing, including pieces of metadata about the report or images and logos and graphics and so on as well to build a cover page. So you might have cover pages at the beginning of your report. You may have to include tables of contents for the entire collection of documents rather than just for the individual documents that made up the report. So you really need to have an overall table of content in many cases. You may well have bookmarks that span, or pagination that spans across the entire report. So each individual document within the report may have its own page numbers, but you may want to add report level pagination as well. And same thing with bookmarks. Obviously, you have bookmarks that need to span across multiple documents. What were originally multiple documents, but in a report is maybe a single PDF file. So you need to ensure you have detailed bookmarks that span the entire content. You may also add things like, watermarks in the background as well, whether it's something simple like a draft statement or confidential, or where it includes pieces of metadata, like information about the content, the authors, etc. as well. And things like hyperlinks, etc. should continue to work. So if you had hyperlinks within documents, they should continue to work once that document is used within a report as well. That's kind of what I mean by a report. And you can take, in terms of defining what the collection is in Documentum, you may be using the virtual documents, and many of you are, to actually create those collections of documents that need to be somehow merged together as well. And you may be using publishing tools to do that, for example, as well, or other platforms. But there is some manual steps involved. You have to interactively kind of decide what to do with it. But you could have a virtual document in Documentum. You could have zip files in Documentum, or zip files in your folders or in SharePoint. You could have binders if you're using Viva, etc. But really, that's the one bit in terms of report generation you need to do. You need to do yourself somehow manually, or with whatever tool you use to create that collection of content. But once that content's created, it then leverages. It can leverage the metadata that's available to it in the repository. So in Documentum, leverage any metadata that's there to automate all the steps of generating the report. So that's basically converting everything to PDF to begin with. So creating a compliant PDF of every single individual document first, making sure they're in the right order, merging everything together so it becomes one single PDF to begin with, applying things like cover pages at the beginning, at the end, paginating across the entire collection, merged documents, adding headers and footers, including pagination, for example. So it's not just the page numbers. It could be, company information, section numbers, information about the document, authors, etc. can all be included automatically. The bookmarks, ensure that the PDF, the merged PDF, is fully bookmarked. Tables of contents are added, that span the entire report. Watermarks added if need be, and then the results need to be ensure that they're compliant. So we can actually, by compliant, we said all those compliant elements about inherit zoom, the PDF version, all those things that make sure that the PDF is fully compliant as well. And that can also include splitting it up into multiple files if necessary, because it exceeds file size limits. All of that can be done fully automatically. All you have to do is provide the virtual document. All of those other steps can be fully automated. The more metadata you have available, the more you can actually automate and leverage that to fully automate the process. So looking at that a little bit in Documentum. So if we take in Documentum, we'll monitor Documentum queues, for example, for jobs. So we basically have a first step in the workflow, and this is just a snapshot of the workflow itself running in the background. We got one that's monitoring a specific job queue. In this case, it's a DocShifter job queue. It can be the standard, the default DM auto render job queue. And then the workflow will route based on the type of report. So it will leverage the metadata. So we'll pull the document type, for example, of that report from the virtual document. And then depending on the value, it will apply different options. So if it's a clinical report, it will take one route through and create, just do this hi-fi transformation, do a splitter, add cover pages, overlays, and then hi-fi to make it compliant at the end. If it's a CTD piece of content, and that might be concatenating multiple smaller granular documents to the correct granularity level within the CTD. So it might not really be considered a report, but ultimately, because it's made up of lots of smaller documents and need to be merged together, it still can be used. You can still use the same tech, if you like, to achieve those results. Same thing with IMPD. You may have a couple of steps, and then other things, just a simple merge only has one or two. So depending on the value of a specific attribute that you can define, in this case, the doc type, you can tell it which route to take with which parameters, etc. as well. You can set up as many different routes as you like to further automate things as well. So if you look at the virtual document rendering process, you just have to create the virtual document, add the content. DocShifter is not doing this. This is fully within your Documentum environment. And that's basically taking your documents. You have, having your virtual documents either at a document level or perhaps a no content object at the beginning, and having the collection of documents within it. So in this case, I just have a simple virtual document with just 6 documents included within it, all at the same level. They're all Word documents in this case, but they could be a mixture of Word, Excel, any of the file formats supported, image-based, could be a mixture of all of them. In this case, I've just got 6 Word documents just for simplicity. That's the first step, obviously creating that virtual document. Automatically in the background, that virtual document will be sent to the queue. That workflow is monitoring the queue. So whatever mechanisms you have in place for sending jobs to the queue, whether that's fully automatically as part of the life cycle or manually using one of the render options within Documentum, depending on how you use it, that job gets sent to the job queue and then renders in the background. All that's running automatically in the background, and the results are stored as, for example, either a rendition of the document, of the virtual document. So I can select my virtual documents, and the results, once everything's rendered and that whole process takes place and merges and adds the TOCs and all those steps that you've defined, the actual rendition or the PDF itself can be stored as a rendition to the virtual document. Or it can be stored as just a new object somewhere else, in some defined location within Documentum as well. So you may then have a separate folder. And in this case, I just have a simple PDF output. My virtual document may be somewhere else, but I've told it the results themselves, the resulting reports, should be generated in this PDF output location. And then I just have a specific, a PDF file created in that location. That PDF file will have, depending on what you've told it, all the different elements you've defined. Some of the things we spoke about before, the cover page added, and that cover page could be completed automatically by having leveraged metadata. So you have templates to define the look and feel of your cover page, but you can leave placeholders where metadata will populate that cover page as well. So things like the report title, the health authority where it will be submitted, who was the last person to modify that report itself or that virtual document, who created it, when it was created, etc. Things like that are already created. Bookmarks are added, for the whole collection of documents. If it was a multi-volume output, because it doesn't just mean one file output, it could be multiple output files because I had to split it so you don't exceed file size limitations. Then obviously it will ensure that only the correct bookmarks are included in each of those resulting PDFs. So we then also perhaps have tables of contents at the beginning to span the entire report. So again, all the reports, in this case, it's just a simple PDF. I don't have a volume number here. I just have the page number. If it was split, I could also highlight, which I still talk about volume number, and that if it's a multi-file output rather than just a single because it's split it, you can then reference and include the actual volume number in the pagination and the overlays as well. So we've got tables of contents. And then bookmarks are ensured that everything meets compliance requirements. So everything's set to inherit zoom, for example. All my hyperlinks are blue. Even if they weren't in the original document, we make sure they're all blue. We make sure that it's your bookmarks are open up to the correct levels. You don't exceed bookmark levels, etc. All of the ICH or individual health authority requirements, guidelines are all met in the results. And again, all of that's done fully automatically without any human interaction at all, other than having created the virtual document and entered it into the life cycle. Next thing is really more focused on individual pieces of content. So taking Word documents and preparing them even before you've actually rendered them, actually preparing and ensuring the content is ready to be converted before inclusion in a submission as well. So we can do automated Word content preparation. So really, again, you can do this from any Documentum repository using the whole idea of sending jobs to the queue, and you could have specific queues dedicated to these validation or these checking processes as well if you want. So any Documentum repository you can integrate with your life cycles, and you're identifying things, issues with the content, issues where you've got comments remaining, you've got section numbers that are out of sequence, or issues with the section numbers, problems with hyperlinks, tables, bookmarks, images in the files, hyperlinks that are broken. Basically, we analyze the content for any issues at all. And we either produce a report that tells you what are the issues that is found in the content and returns that into your Documentum environment, or it can produce a fixed version of the document. Many of the things that we identify can actually be fixed automatically as well. You simply tell it in the configuration, in the workflow, which checks do you want to run? Do you want to just highlight the issues, make them available in the report, or which ones do you actually want to fix? So you can define that and configure it differently depending on the scenario, depending on where this content is being submitted, etc. as well. And this is even before you get to a PDF stage. Excuse me. So basically, in its simplest form, you have a very simple workflow, which is monitoring a Documentum queue. In this case, it's just a queue called DocShifter, and I'm monitoring that every 10 seconds, looking for new jobs coming into the queue. I'm then going to do my document validation steps. So all I'm doing there is telling it to run all the fixes possible. So I have a whole series of over 50 checks and fixes that can be run on my Word content. And this configuration kind of tells me which of those checks I want to perform, which fixes I want to perform. And then I store the results back into Documentum. And that can be stored back in as a rendition of the document or as a new object as well. So if I look at that, for example, if I take a simple Word document that I want to be validated, that would be sent to the job queue in whatever mechanism you use today, whether that's part of the lifecycle or, again, manually send it to a queue. The reports can then automate. In this case, I just said I wanted to create a report. So I can define where that report is created. And it can either be as a rendition of the document if you want. You could have a validation report stored as a specific rendition type to the document, or create a repository, a library, if you like, for those reports directly in Documentum as well. So in this case, I've got my resulting report in this validation reports, and I have this PDF report that shows me issues that it's found in the document. Basically, to begin with, you get a summary of all the issues it's found, how many checks it ran, how many issues it found, some info about the document, and then details of every single check that it performed. Not only every single check, how many of each of those issues it found, how many it was able to resolve, and how many it left unresolved as well. And again, that does that for everything. The report will also show you in detail, and I'm not showing you here just in the interest of time, as well as the summary at the beginning. It then goes into detail for every single issue that it's found. It will tell you where it found it, what the issue was, etc. as well. And along with a description of typically what that issue is and how it can be resolved if you wanted to do it manually. So that's the one option, is to actually create just a report and let an author or somebody actually fix the document. And they use that report to do that. The other option is to actually let it fix the document, in which case it would return a new version. And I'm just showing you that same document here. I'm just showing you the versions of the document. I created a new version of it, and I've given it a label of fixed, and this was automatically done. It created a fixed version of it, a new version in Documentum, that when somebody opens it up, they're going to get a fixed version rather than the old one that was checked, issues were identified, but nothing was actually performed on it. In this case, I actually fix it. So again, this is a very simple, clearly very non-regulatory document, but just to highlight some of the things in some simple examples, where you may have issues with hyperlinks, with broken targets, for example. You have heading numbers that may be out of sequence. So here I've got section 1, first heading, and then 3, second heading. So obviously things are out of order there. You may have empty paragraphs in the document, headings that include white spaces, watermarks existing, tables not using the full width of the page. So you end up with font sizes that are typically too small, images not in line with text, and so on. So just some simple examples of some issues in the content. Now, if you were fixing it automatically, obviously the report would identify all these things as well, and then you could make the updates yourself. Or if you'd updated it, if you'd allowed it to fix it automatically, it would have returned and checked in a new version of the document with those issues resolved. So the link issues resolved. You've got your heading numbers are now correctly sequenced in the numbers. You got watermarks have been removed. Tables now fitting the full page width, which typically reduces font sizing issues. Heading white spaces removed, comments removed, images in line, etc. as well. So again, a fixed version produced. In terms of creating a rendition, obviously a rendering tool typically known for creating renditions. One of the things we do differently is that we allow to create simultaneous renditions that meet different requirements. So for example, you may be submitting the same document to multiple health authorities where their PDF requirements are slightly different. And you could just create one common spec of PDF, but that's not always actually strictly possible because some of their requirements slightly differ. So you can create, for example, a Japanese rendition, Japanese compliant rendition alongside a FDA or EU compliant rendition at the same time as well. So basically multiple documents come in and you could have multiple renditions coming out. So if I look in a workflow, we basically just have a simple workflow coming in and it's going to perform a series of checks, leveraging the metadata that's available to it in Documentum. So I'm going to check for each region that I'm interested in, does it need a rendition for that document? Does it need a rendition for that specific region? And it's basically just going to check a specific piece of metadata, in this case, a JP attribute. And if it's true, it will take one route through the workflow and, for example, fix the document or, create the PDF in a, to meet that health authorities guidelines. Or if a PDF isn't required, it would obviously just move on and check the next region as well. What will happen is for each region, it will look at a detailed set of specs for how that PDF needs to be created. And there's about 200 different properties you can define or predefine. And each country can have a different configuration slightly and different, if you're a CRO, you may have different customers that have slightly different requirements as well. So in there, we can set all the options for, how fonts should be embedded, bookmarks should be created, the optimization set, the PDF version, all of those things can be clearly defined. So ultimately, the results that you get for each of those routes through the workflow will meet a different health authorities guidelines. So in Europe, for example, in this simple document, you may have tables and figures that are spread in the bookmarks are basically spread throughout the bookmark tree. So you can have tables just at any point beneath just about any heading or any heading section. However, in Japan, the same document, when it's processed, you may have to meet the requirements or the recommendations in Japan, you may want to group those tables in the bookmark section at the bottom automatically. So instead of having the bookmarks scattered for the tables and figures throughout the bookmark tree, they're grouped at the end. You can have a list of tables, a list of figures, a list of diagrams, whatever you need at the bottom, performed fully automatically. And those two could have been created simultaneously, from exactly the same source content. Okay. In terms of automating your PDF validation, so once you've got PDFs, you can then obviously also want to validate it and make sure it's ready to be included in a submission. So the same kind of thing, we can then perform checks on things like the PDF version, issues with bookmarks, hyperlinks, your initial view settings, font embedding has been performed the correct way, etc. as well, comments not included, and so on. So again, we can have workflows that basically perform automated validation and checks, submission checks on each individual document as well. And this can be done when the document is created or as a document is sent to you from a CRO. Can be an automated part of the process to validate it and check what issues it's found, whether or not many of them can be fixed automatically in the PDF. Some of them you may need to identify and go back to source to check. The sooner you do that, though, the better. You don't want to find that out when you run the submission validation at the very end and just find out you've got content issues that you could potentially have identified much earlier this way. So in this case, you have then a report that's returned. Or you can, automatically fix it. Return the report that tells you what checks were ran, whether it passed or failed each of those checks in the PDF content, and then it will highlight where all of those issues are found, what fonts were missing, what fonts weren't embedded correctly, what bookmarks, what hyperlinks aren't blue, for example, etc. as well. So then gives you a detailed report that you can then use to potentially fix some of those elements if you don't want to do it automatically. On top of that, you could fix things automatically as well. So you could reprocess the file, take it through, a compliant rendering step, and actually sort of fix many of those elements, but also include things like in the steps like barcode reading. If you've got barcodes, they can be interpreted automatically. Content detector can look for empty pages or empty sections in the document and remove them automatically. PDF bookmarker, can allow you to build bookmarks even when the PDF had none. It may have been an OCR file. You could automatically OCR the file and then automatically generate some bookmarks based on the text search strings and font usage, etc. So some advanced searching capabilities to allow you to automate the creation of many bookmarks. Same thing with hyperlinks. There's many hyperlinks can be automatically generated as well based on some search criteria. So again, there's a lot of fixes you can perform automatically without having to go back to the source document. Some other use cases, again, most of what we focused on was really the generating of the PDF, the validation of the content with the doc validator, PDF validator, report generation. Any-to-any just means we can also output to non-PDF formats. So if you've got content in Documentum, you want to convert to HTML or XML or raw text, or convert from doc to docx, for example, you can do a lot of other non-PDF conversions also with the any-to-any, or monitor email inboxes for incoming messages for correspondence from the health authority, process those emails and the attachments, and store the results directly in Documentum as well. On top of that, we have insights that allow you to monitor what's taken place across your environment. How many pieces of content have been processed, how long did they take, what types of content, what sizes are they, what fonts have been used in the content, how many documents use each font, etc. You can identify rogue fonts in there as well that you shouldn't be using, and times a day when you're typically processing more than others. So with that, just to conclude very briefly, everything here really is to address, basically to help reduce risk in the process and speed up the entire process as well. Really streamlining the process, automating as much as you can to accelerate the content preparation steps that you have to go through. A lot of that can help with simultaneous global submissions, as if that's the goal as well, by simultaneously creating output rather than creating one and then manually having to create the others, can certainly help in that goal as well. Obviously, a big thing is being able to create compliance, achieve content compliance earlier, rather than waiting until you check and validate your submission. You can be sure that the individual documents themselves are fully compliant much, much earlier in the process. And that way, any issues with that at a content level can be identified earlier and fixed earlier. And again, that can obviously sort of streamline everything. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining. Sorry, I ran over a couple of minutes. Clearly, I wasn't talking quickly enough this time, so apologies. I did have a quick couple of poll questions before you go. Obviously, this was quick. If anybody wants to have a more detailed discussion about your specific use cases or just has a couple of questions, either email us, put it in the chat in here. I see a few questions have come in. We'll obviously get back to you on those. Hopefully, I'll speak to some of you again at some point. This will be recorded, so the session will be sent out to everybody, so you have a copy of the recording and a summary provided as well. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining. Have a good evening or afternoon, wherever you are. And thanks again, and hopefully see you again in a future session. Thank you.